Hey AP, hope you guys are doing swell and dandy. We're going to take a look at 6.15 to 6.17 today. Okay. So 6.15, we get Caesar's account of the other um, group that has some power and authority in the Gallic state, and this other class, besides for the Druids, is the Equites or the cavalry, if you will. All right, and they obviously are very influential in war. They have a decent bit of money because they can, afford a horse, so that's kind of important. Caesar also tells us that they fought wars almost yearly to either um, inflict injuries or to avenge them, basically. Um, and Also those that um, basically in proportion to how noble they were in their race and their supplies. In that same proportion, they had different vassals and clients. Um, so these guys would have um, lots of slaves and attendants and people that owed them things, owed them favors. And you can see that earlier on in book one when we had Orgetorix, and he had those that huge group of people basically come to his trial to kind of help him out. All right. So Caesar doesn't spend a whole lot of time on this cavalry group, um, and they clearly are not as influential from a cultural standpoint as the Druids were. Okay. All right, and then 616, you get this rather disturbing account of some of their religious practices. Um, and he talks about them being a very religious people, okay? Um, and how they would oftentimes sacrifice to the gods. In particular, they would practice human sacrifice. Um, and they would do this for a number of different things. Um, he talks about whether they were really sick or they're going to go into battles and that sort of thing. Um, and the druids were the ones that administered these sacrifices, and they also you kind of get a picture of at least how they viewed the gods. Line 6-7, they think that um, the divine power of the immortal gods is not able to be placated, um, except by giving a life for a life. So you kind of get this um, almost a savage picture of the way in which they viewed their gods. And then we get this famous passage about the wicker men. They would construct these massive structures of made of wicker, and then they would fill them with people, and then um, light them aflame. Um, Really, really terrible way to die. And he talks about they would mainly use criminals and people that committed crimes and stuff. Um, but if they ran out of those, then they would. I like the use of the word they would descend to. They would go down to um, the um, the innocent. So um, again, really really disturbing sort of picture here. And then they think that the cries of these victims was somehow pleasing to their gods. And then 617, this one is kind of continuing on um, some of their belief about specific gods that would be familiar to the Romans. And there's a lot of overlap here, at least how Caesar presents it. The first one and the most important for them seems to be the god Mercury. And Mercury, he mentions several things. He talks about them having lots of images or statues of him. Um, they consider him the inventor of the arts, and then the leader of roads and journeys, and then also they view him as having a great deal of power um, over getting money and merchants and that sort of thing. So you can see his kind of connection with trade. All right, and also remember the Romans saw him as he was the one that kind of um, escorted souls to the underworld as well. So that's another important role of Mercury. And some of the symbols, obviously the winged sandals, those are um, one of the most famous, but also the very famous Caduceus is also seen with him. That's kind of the staff with the twin snakes and wings on it. You see that a lot with Mercury. Right. Okay, and then Caesar Caesar kind of adds, oh, and after him, Apollo, Mars, Jupiter, Minerva. All right, so they like the rest of them too. Um, and he basically says they believe similar things about the remaining gods. So Apollo um, helps to ward off diseases. Okay, and that is one kind of common thing with Apollo is his role in medicine and everything. But another god that is not definitely not an Olympian, but one that's associated with medical practices and all that is the god Asclepius. So he's an important one too, but he's obviously not mentioned here. And then Minerva with her, she's the arts and crafts goddess, and also with strategic warfare. So they honored her. And then it's interesting, kind of Jupiter is just kind of thrown in here into the kind of the middle of things. He holds the power of the you know of the gods, so he is like the supreme god, but it doesn't seem like he holds a very high uh, place in their particular cult. And then Mars, of course, being the god of war. And he goes on. The rest of 617 is kind of um, is an interesting one about how they would dedicate spoils of war to Mars, sometimes to other gods as well, but particularly to Mars. And he mentions at the end there that you can actually see these. You go to some of these towns and you can see these tumulus, these mounds of um, basically spoils um, that have been dedicated to the gods. And he also talks about how it is a very serious crime um, to try um, to take those things, or if you've dedicated it to the gods to try to hide it. So he talks about how it's a really serious crime or offense, punishable. He says cum cruciatu, so with torture. So you want to fulfill your vows if you make them. So all right, and that's where we got for today. As always, let me know if you have any questions or anything about um, grammar or anything that's going on here. Um, and we'll do for Monday. We'll finish off book 6, so it's going from 618 to 620. Um, so we'll finish that off for Monday. And John, obviously, you need to be make sure that you're reviewing the rest of the material as well, because um, once we finish book 6, that'll finish Unit 2. But remember, John, that you need to be up through Unit 4, so that would be Book 2 of the Aeneid and Book 4 of Caesar. So make sure you're reviewing those. And John, please let me know if you do have any questions or anything about um, the exam and all that stuff. So, all right. Hope you guys have a great weekend and love you all and talk to you later.